In the city of Sacramento, California, during the late 70s, in the span of only about a month, there was a cannibalistic, necrophiliac, and schizophrenic murderer on the loose. This was Richard Chase, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento.
Richard Chase was born on May 23, 1950. His parents were always strict, and they fought a lot and eventually got divorced. He was sometimes beat by his father, too. He had always shown weird behavior as a child, and by the age of 10, Chase showed the 3 warning signs of children who grow to be serial killers known as the McDonald Triad, which is wetting the bed beyond normal age, cruelty to animals, and setting fires. In Chase's high school life, he was actually seen as somewhat popular and had a lot of friends, as said by former classmates, but he did always have problems with his relationships and impotency. He later voluntarily sought help from a psychiatrist, but they were unable to help him and just noticed that his problems were a result of repressed anger. During this time in his life, he became a heavy drug user. He would often use psychedelic drugs, which, as a budding schizophrenic, just made his symptoms much worse. At 18 years old, he moved in with some of his friends, and these roommates became so bothered by his drug abuse and behavior that they wanted him to leave. He refused, causing them to leave instead, and he ended up moving back in with his mother. Chase became completely convinced that his mother was trying to poison him, so she tried to get him help and put him in a psych ward for about a year. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Once he was deemed no longer a danger to society, in 1976 he was released back into her custody. She weaned him off his medication and got him his own apartment. During this period of time where he was unmedicated and alone, his schizophrenia got worse. He would say things about his stomach being turned around, he thought his heart would stop beating, and bones were growing out of the back of his head. Many psychologists note this to be Cotard syndrome, where someone believes that they are a walking corpse or that they're missing organs. To cure his ailments, he would go to rabbit farms, bring them home, drain their blood, or even just blend their whole body in a blender. He would ingest this, believing that it would stop his heart from shrinking. Just 2 days before his first actual murder, he had an unsuccessful murder attempt of a woman named Dorothy. She was just in her kitchen doing dishes, and she felt a bullet go right by her head, heard glass shattering, and it hit the cabinet right behind her. This bullet ended up matching the one found at the next crime scene. On December 29, 1977 was his first murder. He killed 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin in a drive-by shooting while he was helping his wife bring groceries into the house. During the period of time between his first and second murder, Chase was involved in a lot of weird, violent, aggressive behavior. He adopted a dog from this woman, killed and drank its blood, and then called the woman from a payphone anonymously and described how he killed the dog and ate it. On January 11, 1978, he asked a neighbor for a cigarette and restrained her until she gave him the whole pack. He also encountered his old high school friend Nancy Holden at a grocery store and harassed her and tried to get in her car. 2 weeks later, he broke into a house, robbed it, urinated inside a drawer of baby clothes, defecated in the bed in the child's room, and when the owner returned, Chase escaped. He continued to search for unlocked doors on houses. On January 23, 1978, Chase's second murder took place. Teresa Wallen was a pregnant woman taking out the garbage. Chase went in through her door, shot her when she returned inside, and raped her corpse while stabbing her. He severed her insides, removed multiple organs, and drank the blood from them, but he left the kidneys completely intact. He put dog feces in her mouth before he left. On January 27, 1978, Chase would commit the last of his murders. Evelyn Meredith was a 38-year-old mother with a 6-year-old son named Jason, and she was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew David. Richard entered the family's house through an unlocked door. He shot Evelyn in the shower, and when he dragged her body to the bedroom, her son Jason came into the room and Chase shot him twice. He went down to the kitchen to get a knife and saw Dan Meredith, the neighbor, walk in. He shot him as well and then heard a baby's crying. So he went into the child's room and shot the baby. He began his same blood ritual as Teresa Wallen. He opened the stomach, removed the intestines, stabbed organs, leaving only the kidneys unscathed. He collected the blood and drank it. He also cut out one of her eyes. He broke the baby's head and dumped the brains in the bathtub. When the neighbors came to check, Richard left with a bucket of blood and the body of the baby. Richard later blended the organs of this baby, ingested it, and left his remains by a nearby church. The police knew these murders were connected because they found the same footprints and the same bullets from the gun, but there were no fingerprints because Chase wore gloves during all these crimes. Detectives knew that he was schizophrenic from the manner of his crimes. They were disorganized and often in daylight. A lot of neighbors saw him walking around, so the police knew to look for a skinny white man in his 20s. After hearing about the murders, Nancy Holden, Chase's old high school friend who he had earlier harassed, told her police officer father-in-law about the incident. They checked his records and saw that he had a concealed weapon arrest and that he had history in a psychiatric hospital. Cops and detectives went to his house to investigate. They knocked on the door and he didn't answer, but they knew that he was inside. So they lied and said that they would come back later. When Chase was convinced that they had left, he went outside carrying a cardboard box filled with bloody pieces of paper. The cops yelled at him to stop, and he threw the box at them and ran away. A cop caught him and bashed him in his head, arrested him, found his gun, and found pictures of Evelyn that he had taken from the house he committed the murder in. When they acquired a search warrant and went into his apartment, all of his things were stained with blood. Small bits of bone were found in the kitchen, and there were animal remains on dishes in the fridge, as well as human brain. And there were human remains found in the blender. A calendar was found where Chase had written the word today on all the dates of his murders that he had committed. There were over 40 other dates found in the same calendar, planning murders out in the future.
By the time it was all over, a dozen psychiatrists had examined Chase. He admitted to one that he was disturbed about killing his victims, and he was afraid they might come for him from the dead. There was no evidence in his admissions that he had ever felt compelled. He simply thought the blood was therapeutic. One psychiatrist found him to be an antisocial personality, not schizophrenic. His thought processes were not disrupted, and he was aware. Chase was charged with 6 counts of murder. The prosecutor emphasized throughout the trial that Chase had had a choice and mentioned several times that he had brought rubber gloves with him to the victims' homes with the intent of murder. Altogether, there were 250 prosecution exhibits, the strongest of which were Chase's gun and Dan Meredith's wallet, found in Chase's pocket. The first witness in a trial that stretched across 4 months was David Wallen, who described the scene of horror he had encountered upon coming home that day. Nearly 100 witnesses followed him. Chase then took the stand in his own defense. He looked awful, having dropped in weight to 107 pounds. His eyes were sunken and lusterless. He claimed to have been semi-conscious during the Wallen murder, and he described the way he had been mistreated much of his life. He admitted to drinking Wallen's blood. He did not recall much about the second series of murders, but knew that he had shot the baby in the head and decapitated it, leaving it in a bucket in the hope of getting more of its blood. He thought the baby was something else, but did not elaborate. He thought that his problems stemmed from his inability to have sex with girls as a teenager, and he said he was sorry for the killings. The defense asked for a verdict of second-degree murder to spare Chase the death penalty, since he was clearly insane and had never been given proper help. Tochterman argued that he was a sexual sadist, a monster who knew what he was doing and who could not be salvaged. On May 8, 1978, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of 6 counts of first-degree murder. During the sanity phase, the jury found Chase legally sane after deliberating an hour. It took them 4 hours to decide that Chase should die in the gas chamber at San Quentin Penitentiary. While interviewing killers all over the country to add information about criminal psychology to their database, FBI profilers visited Richard Chase.
During his time on death row, the other prisoners were disturbed by the acts he had committed and wanted him gone. They would oftentimes try and talk him into killing himself. Richard Chase never met his end in the gas chamber as he was intended. He eventually hoarded enough antidepressants to kill himself on December 26, 1980, by toxic ingestion.